I would like to demonstrate how to tune a SQL in a SQL batch with the Tune SQL with Plan Guide module. So how can you get a SQL batch from your database? You can get the SQL batch from your application, source code, or from a SQL profiler. Like this. Here is a batch. So, what is the SQL batch? SQL batch is a multiple SQL or transect SQL that is executed in the same batch in SQL Server. So we can copy this SQL batch to the Tune SQL with Plan Guide module here. Let's press a new button to tune it with Plan Guide. Here we input the SQL property. We are going to tune a SQL in a SQL batch. So you can paste the SQL batch text here. Our module will analyze your SQL batch and tells you that there are 2 SQL statements in the batch. Here is the first SQL statement, and here is the other SQL statement. We select this SQL statement and tune it. Okay, now the Plan Guide information shows you that it is a batch, and this a batch text here. And then we're going to tune this SQL statement here. Let me press the Tune button here and use the default option and then pick Press OK. Now it's going to complete the tuning of the SQL statement in a few minutes. Okay, let's see. A lot of plan guides have been generated for this SQL statement, and the benchmark is started. Alright, the benchmark is going to finish. We found that there is a PG1, has the best performance. It is a 87% of improvement compare with the original query plan. So before we apply the plan guide to the database, to see how it can improve a SQL in a batch, let me go to the SQL Server Management Studio and take a look at the performance of this SQL batch before the plan guide is created. I have the batch here with the 2 SQL statements, and then we execute these 2 SQL statements. Since the first SQL statement is quite good, and we don't have to tune the first SQL, but the second SQL statement take about 3000 milliseconds, and the elapsed time is 3000 milliseconds as well. So let's go back to our tuning product and see how can we create a plan guide for the SQL batch. Okay, we create a plan guide for the SQL batch, and then click the Create Plan Guide button here. And then we go back to the SQL Server Management Studio and take a look. The performance of the second SQL statement. Remember, here are the performance of the SQL statement. Let's execute this batch again and see what is the performance. Now the performance is improved a lot. For the second SQL statement, see, here is the CPU time is saved up to 50%. And it is elapsed time it is saved up to 80%. It is 463 milliseconds. So it's quite good. But please be reminded that this is a batch. We tune the SQL statement in this batch only. If we execute the SQL statement in standalone mode, there will be no improvement for the SQL statement. It's a standalone SQL statement. For example, I execute this again for this specific SQL statement in this batch. You can see that it is go back to the original performance. About 3000 milliseconds again for CPU time and elapsed time. So if you want to tune a SQL statement for a standalone SQL, you have to tune it with Plan Guide for standalone SQL. For this SQL, if they are executed, SQL statement is standalone mode. And if you got the SQL statement is executed in a batch like this, I executed this in a batch, then the improvement is there. Please be remembered that a standalone SQL and SQL batch has different tuning methods. In the Tune SQL with Plan Guide module, It is for the Plan Guide SQL tuning for a SQL in a batch. Our Plan Guide SQL tuning feature is very powerful and unique in the market for MS SQL Server. Thank you for watching our demonstration. Thanks.